So early on, when the WMS market started, it's probably about 20, 25 years old now, in terms of being a formal product. Early on, the product was a competitive advantage. So if you were able to deliver orders faster, more accurately to your customers, it was a competitive advantage, and people were buying it specifically for that. However, from what I'm seeing in today's market, prices have come down to the point that it's almost the cost of doing business, especially if you're in the wholesale or anything to do with delivering products to customers. So at this point in the business cycle, I would say if you don't have a warehouse management system and you have reasonable volumes and reasonable labor, and we'll talk about those in a few moments, you might be at a significant competitive disadvantage to your in your industry. So that's just some things to think about from why to buy. So how do you know you might be a fit for this technology? You know, as I mentioned, it's not free to purchase. It's not. It takes some time and effort to implement. So why go through it? Well, let's see if you're a candidate. So, you know, if your order volumes are rising, you know, in terms of you're getting more business, typically that's good. But if it's coming at the cost of more expenses, maybe not so good. Also, if your inventory values are rising, meaning that you're having to have more inventory on hand to satisfy your growing order business, that's typically not a good sign. Or if your customer service levels and or your inventory and order accuracy is going down because you have probably too much labor, too much activity going on in the warehouse. So if you see any of those things going on in your business cycle, probably a good indicator that you might benefit from WMS. And then this is what we've seen, you know, in the recent 5 to 10 years is the compliance labeling issue. So if you're in the business of you know, shipping items, probably not, you know, to individuals, but if you're shipping to other trading partners, maybe some big box retailers, etc., they have specific pallet labeling and carton labeling requirements, and they want you to meet those. The warehouse management system can help you with that. And if you don't have that in place, your customers may be using you as a profit center because you're not shipping to them correctly. But again, just an area to start looking into. So from a size perspective, you know, a warehouse, typically what I look at is you have to have at least some of these features in place. Maybe 30,000 square feet, and that's typically a warehouse processing place space. If you've maybe got at least 10 full-time equivalents working in the warehouse, now you can go down maybe to 5 to 7, but I try to look at a benchmark of at least 10 users in the warehouse to kind of make it justifiable. Maybe another metric might be how many dock doors do you have. If you have at least 5 dock doors, both for shipping and receiving, that might indicate that you're at the volume where you can benefit. Maybe plus or minus 5,000 SKUs. And also, if you're in the business of doing a lot in serial number control and tracking of items in your supply chain, that might be another good reason to invest in warehouse management systems. But the idea here is just to give you an idea, just to see if you're even at the right size to be considering warehouse management technology. A large part of what we're going to be discussing is a return on investment, and return on investment deals with numbers. So I put this out there. You probably won't include this in anything to factor into your business case, but it's something I like to think about, keeps my mind fresh. 111,111,111 squared equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So as you're thinking about numbers, try to keep it fun, try to keep it entertaining. So as we start talking about some of the value drivers for warehouse management systems, so we've seen maybe you're at the size, your capacity, you're at the order volumes, or you have some issues going on in your warehouse that you might maybe start thinking about warehouse management system technology. Let's start looking at it. How do we justify it? What are the areas that we're going to see savings? So I've broken it down into tangible or hard dollar savings, and then other things that are intangible that may be more soft benefits that you may or may not want to include in a justification project. But there are both of those, so we try to categorize those. We'll spend a little bit of time on both of these categories. So pretty much the first area that you're going to see benefit is improved inventory record accuracies, and that has a lot of impact on a lot of different areas, from picking productivity to purchasing habits. But typically what we see is customers get up to 99.9+% inventory record accuracies. Now, you can't really put a dollar savings on having better inventory records, but you can extrapolate savings from other areas. So if you have bad inventory records, you're probably going to be purchasing more than you actually need because the purchasing team is really not going to have confidence that what the inventory records they see in the system are accurate, or they may not even see anything. So what they may end up doing is buying more just in case. You also may run into processing delays. So as you're picking orders and getting them shipped out, if your operators can't find the inventory because the inventory records are inaccurate, then that's going to extend your order to cash cycle, which means you're going to take longer to get paid. And then sometimes if you're taking too long to ship orders, you just may end up eventually losing business or losing the sales because customers don't want to keep waiting. They don't want to accept back orders, et cetera. And then overall, you'll typically end up with excess inventory in your warehouse because you have to have a cushion to kind of compensate for the inventory inaccuracies. And then all of this typically leads to overall lower productivity in the warehouse, and that's going to be a big savings that we see next. And then if you're having to expedite orders because you can't find items to be shipped on time, you're typically going to have higher freight costs due to expedited shipping. So inventory record accuracy, you will benefit, but there are secondary areas that you can actually start claiming the benefits from having better inventory record accuracies. Typically, this is the next big area of benefit is in the labor savings. So you can either look at it from the perspective of redeploying your labor to other areas, such as adding value to other processes, or you can actually start looking at headcount reductions. It really just depends on the culture of your company and how you want to position this. But typically, you can see an increase in labor productivity from 20 to 30%, just based off of the way that the new processes are going to be run. So in a lot of justifications, this is where the hard dollar savings are identified. The system's doing a lot of the directions, so what we try to do is essentially remove any thinking from the operators themselves. Basically want them just to do what the system is directing them to do and kind of eliminate any decision criteria that they have to go through. What I've heard is, what the WMS typically does is it makes everybody on average better. So what I've heard is that it's better to have everybody average than it is to have a couple people great. So if you've probably got one or two people in the warehouse that are really performing well, that's okay. But from what I've seen, on average, if you can kind of raise the mark for everybody across the board, you're going to see better performance from the warehouse. So that's just kind of a rule of thumb to think about. But typically what you can target is probably a 20 to 30% improvement in labor productivity. And sometimes that's where a lot of people just stop and say, okay, that's enough for us to justify. You can also see administrative savings. So when I talk about labor savings, there's obviously improved labor picking productivity, improved receiving productivity. You're able to do better cycle counts, but administrative savings, sometimes people overlook that, especially if you're working in a paper-based environment. Somebody's got to print out the papers. They have to file the papers. They have to sort the papers. I was just in a warehouse recently, and there was a clerk, customer service clerk. She walked out to the floor, and she was actually tracking down an order. The customer was on the phone. They wanted to know the status of their order, and she didn't have visibility into what was happening. So sometimes if you have a warehouse management system with the right tools, such as an order work center like Accellos provides, people can go in. The lady could have just looked on the screen to see that specific order was released to the floor. It was being picked, and she would have some visibility and some confidence to explain to a customer the true status of that order. So administrative savings is sometimes a big benefit as well. So when we talk about labor productivity, I wanted to give you some insight into why labor productivity is improved. If you look at it typically from an operating budget, and again, everyone's different, but typically 50% of an operating budget from a labor perspective is consumed by order picking if you look at the chart on the left. So whatever we can do to improve order picking productivity is going to have a direct impact on our overall benefit. So if you look at the chart on the right, typically from what we see on a typical pick tour is 55% of the time is spent just traveling. In terms of productivity, that's non-value added time. So whatever we can do to consolidate orders to be picked in waves, or if we can do replenishment picks, which means we're picking a bunch of eaches and then sorting them to specific orders downstream, we can significantly cut into that orange 55% travel time and make that less and have the operators focus more on value-added picking tasks. So when we talk about labor productivity. Typically, it comes in the form of improved order picking. So I would encourage you to start looking at your workflows, see how your picks are being done, and try to identify if the warehouse management system can help you pick more efficiently. The outside of labor, now we start looking at the ability to reduce physically the inventory levels in the warehouse. Now, this can be, you can target maybe 15 to 30% reduction. Again, this is a little bit of a slippery slope. I would encourage you to get your financial people involved on this one if you do think you can benefit, because there are things outside of the warehouse that really determines inventory levels. So while having better inventory record accuracy, you could technically reduce inventory levels. A lot of times in a warehouse, you really don't have any control over inventory levels because you're being told what's being shipped out in the terms of an order, and you're being told by somebody what's coming in terms of purchase orders. So basically, you may not have any control over that. Especially if you look at demand variability, you don't have any control over how customers are ordering. If you're ordering products from Asia, for example, lead times may be weeks, so you have to have cushions in there in case something comes in later. Lot sizing is certainly outside of your control as a warehouse manager. For instance, I was in another customer recently, and they have to order pallets of oil by the truckload because that's the break points that they're getting. So it's more of a buying, purchasing policy that they're having to receive in, although they only use maybe one pallet a week. They've got to store 22 pallets for 22 weeks because that's the way it's being purchased. So that is really outside of their control. And also, you might have corporate policies that have set safety stock levels. And more importantly, if you've, on the other project standpoint, if you've recently gone through for example, an ERP implementation or purchase, sometimes inventory reduction is a big piece of justifying an ERP. So if you were to tell your CFO, hey, we're going to reduce inventory by 30% by buying a warehouse management system, he's going to say, well, good for you. We just did that with the ERP. So either the inventory, either you're telling me a fib or somebody needs to get fired because they didn't do it when they bought the ERP. So it's a little bit of a funny, but that's typically the case you need to pay attention to. So you can possibly reduce inventory, but again, it's a slippery slope, and be cautious when you approach your C-level executives about that. So with that, if you do reduce your inventories, there are different ways. Again, I would encourage you to get with your financial team or financial representative to determine how you can quantify this. But there are two reduction approaches towards inventory. One is you can actually have a direct reduction in working capital. So if you actually have to purchase less inventory right away, that's going to be maybe a one-time benefit that you can justify as you implement the warehouse management system. So it's a one-time write-down or one-time less purchase of inventory. But then overall, as you have less working capital, there's a formula or a cost feature called carrying costs, which means you're going to be carrying less inventory. So you should also realize a carrying cost benefit, but that is an ongoing benefit as opposed to a one-time reduction. So again, inventory reduction is kind of a slip and slope, but if you do feel like you can take benefit for improved inventory reductions, then look at the one-time reduction as well as maybe talk to your financial people and see if you can get a carrying cost benefit from that. If you're able to increase your inventory turns, again, inventory turn is a measure of a financial metric used by how busy, how productive you are in terms of your assets. So if you're able to do more sales with the same level of inventory, your inventory turns are going to get better. So whatever your industry average is, you might take a look at that and see if you can get better. So in this example, if we're at 2 inventory turns per year, our carrying cost factor might be 6x. So whatever you can do from an efficiency standpoint or a reduction in inventory, if you can raise your inventory turns to 6, that's going to lower your carrying cost down to 2x, and you're going to be able to realize that as a benefit. Now you'll have to work with your financial people again to determine how you can quantify that, but that is a hidden area that sometimes people do overlook in terms of improved inventory accuracies. So still on the physical inventory side, if you can actually, again, I don't know, most companies that don't have any automation today are probably doing at least one physical inventory process where they go out to the warehouse, they shut down the warehouse for 2, 3, 4 days, and they do a physical count of everything in the warehouse. It's called the physical inventory count. You can do that, however, what I would encourage you to do is look at a warehouse management system with a a good cycle counting program, and if you can start implementing cycle counts, you can actually get to the point where you can, you can basically eliminate the physical inventory process. Again, working with your financial people and your external auditors. But when you do a physical inventory count, it's typically done once a year. When you're doing physical inventory counts, rest assured your inventory records are going to be good at least one day a year. That's the day that you finish your inventory record. After that, it's just human nature processes. Inventory is going to be off. So when you do go through a physical inventory process, the balance sheet is typically impacted because there are adjustments being made right after the physical inventory process. You typically have to shut down the facility, which means nobody's getting product shipped out. Customer orders are delayed, and you also have overtime labor associated with the physical count. So if you think you can eliminate the physical inventory process, which I would say 99% of the time you can. So just take a look at it. Let's say I'm going to eliminate it. Maybe you can save $100,000 just by eliminating the inventory count because you're not shutting down the facility. You're not having to do adjustments. You're not having to pay overtime for people to come into the warehouse that aren't familiar with the warehouse. And you don't have to pay for donuts for people to come in or pizza parties to keep people working on the weekends. And then you don't have any delayed shipments, so you can keep the operations up and running 24/7 or whatever your standard operating hours are. So sometimes that is a very hard dollar savings that you can realize. It may not happen right away, but I would say within the first year and a half, 2 years, you can eliminate that physical inventory process through very effective cycle counting. And again, I apologize if you don't know what cycle counting is, but we've got a white paper on that if you want to know a little bit more. Next area of benefit is improved shipping accuracies. What you should be looking at is maybe a solution with an integrated shipping system. You don't have to have one, but it certainly does bring significant benefits. For example, Accellos has the warehouse management system along with a fully integrated, works hand in hand with Handshakes shipping system. So what that means is the WMS can basically get the orders correct and set up and geared towards the shipping system for getting it right the first time. You should expect shipping accuracies up to 99.9%. So if you're being penalized, again, from a customer service perspective, either on a compliance labeling perspective or if you're shipping short orders or wrong inventory, if you're being penalized by your customers, then WMS should be able to justify, you can at least prove that things were shipped out when you said they were, and what quantities and what case sizes. And maybe if you're losing business because you have poor customer service or the wrong items are being shipped, then maybe an improved shipping accuracy could be a benefit for your business. So when you do look at shipping accuracies and customer service levels, you also have to look at possibly the cost to your customer, the cost to return the items if they do get returned. The thing with missed shipments is if you ship somebody short, let's say you send them the wrong item or you send them 5 less than what you charge them, they're going to tell you about that. If you send them 5 more than what you told them, than what they wanted, they're probably not going to hear about that. It's going to come out of your bottom line book. So keep that in mind as well. So whatever you can do to improve shipping accuracy by getting orders picked efficiently and staged, that's going to have a direct benefit as well. Space utilization is another very tangible benefit because if you have a warehouse, you're paying for the space regardless if there's anything in it or not. So if you have bin locations that are half empty, maybe you can better utilize those locations or those bins by putting more inventory in those locations. But you really can't do that unless you have visibility into what location utilization is. So when you look at space utilization, you may be able to delay facility expansions because the warehouse is too full. It might be too full because you have too much of the wrong inventory. You're ordering too much inventory because of inaccuracies. So again, whatever you can do to improve those things that we spoke about earlier, you may be able to improve space utilization and then avoid expanding your facilities. Now, you may be growing, so you may need to expand, but if you can put that off 2 or 3 years, that's going to be a capital expenditure that can be avoided. So the financial people are going to look at that positively. Also, you can re-warehouse products. So if you go through your warehouse and you see a lot of half pallet or half full locations or bins, maybe you can look at your system and it can tell you that you can consolidate inventory. Again, a lot of that depends on if you have lot numbers or FIFO controls that allow you to do that. But it is possible, just having visibility into where the inventory is, that you can actually go in and start re-warehousing or consolidating inventory to better locations. And if you can do that, then you can obviously eliminate expansion as well. And if you have better planning and SKU information, meaning if you know what the dimensions of your items are, how much room they're going to take up in a bin location, this is more of an advanced feature, but a good warehouse management system will tell you how much of a specific SKU based off of the unit of measure can fit into a location. So it's going to help you optimize the bin locations that you have set up. What I like about this is then it allows you to vary your bin size locations. So maybe you've got everything now set up in a selective rack location, and it's all in pallet size quantities. Well, maybe your product's coming in from some suppliers in half pallet size quantities. Well, it's going to, right away, your utilization is going to be 50% because everything's set up for a pallet size. You've got items coming in half pallet sizes. That's going to be a waste there. So if you know what's coming in, if you know how much room it takes up at the SKU level, or as stored SKU level, then you can maybe start planning for those half-size bin locations, and again, be able to get more bin locations within your warehouse. Now, however, this is what I call a step function, because if you start looking at the savings here, it becomes you have to have a lot of space savings to really justify claiming this as a benefit. What do I mean by that? If you have one bin location and you're able to free up that location, there's not really much you can do with that free location. You might be able to put another piece of inventory in there. It may look nicer, but you can't really go out and sublease that space, or you can't avoid expansion. Now, if you can free up space in a whole aisle, for example, that will actually be a benefit that you can actually claim. So just look at how much space you're actually saving and what you can actually do with that space savings once it's realized. So I call that a step function. It is something you can benefit, but again, keep a close eye on it. We'll wrap up some of the other intangible benefits here just to kind of show you what some of them might be. But sales, if you can increase your customer satisfaction, if you can increase your order cycle times, meaning from the time I get the order to the time I get it shipped out, maybe you can start guaranteeing same-day deliveries. That might be a reason that people come and buy from you. So you can possibly increase sales. If you're having less detention charges on your receiving or shipping docks for your trucks or your carriers because you're able to process things more efficiently, that can be a benefit. Expediting, if you have a large expediting fees for your carriers, or you have to spend a lot of time shipping expedite, then that can be avoided, again, if you have better planning. And then paperwork, again, I was just with another customer, another prospect. They were printing out small, they had one line, one unit orders. They were printing those out in paper, and then they were sorting them by bin locations. That was a lot of time, a lot of effort by the clerk to do that. And then it was also a lot of paperwork, printing supplies that they could actually eliminate by having everything done on a handheld wireless scanner. So if you can, it is possible to eliminate the paperwork as well as the storage fee for storing paper. That is a benefit, but you have to know what it is. So with those were the tangible benefits. Now we're going to shift gears just a little bit and talk about the intangible benefits, or the soft dollars. And the reason more is not necessarily always better. So if you think you can justify your system based off of tangible benefits, maybe you want to stop there. And I'll give you an example here. So if you look at some of these famous documents, the Pythagorean theorem is 24 words. The 10 Commandments is 179 words. The Gettysburg Address is 286 words. The U.S. government regulation on the sale of cabbage is 26,911 words. And I'll leave it up to you to determine which of these documents has more of an impact on your life. So just keep in mind as you're trying to find justification, don't get too greedy, and more is not necessarily always better, but there are places to start looking. So you can have reduced errors if you can, again, if you have shipping errors, if your order picking accuracy is not up to par, you can have a reduction in errors based off of basically the data collection process. So we typically encourage our customers to use a wireless handheld scanners in the warehouse to confirm items. The alternative to that is, basically the paper-based entry system. So if you need to move product around, you're probably writing it on a move ticket. It gets put on somebody's desk. It gets put on a pile. Eventually they get to it. Well, two problems with that is sometimes the paper gets misplaced. Sometimes we have typing errors, and what I've seen is there's about one long keystroke per every 300 strokes, so the data is inaccurate. And then by the time the system gets updated, depending on the work queue, it's probably out of sync with the actual inventory positions in the warehouse. So if you can start capturing data real time when you actually move the inventory around, it's going to be better. It's going to be more synchronized with your actual product moves. So the system of record is going to be up to date. And then with most scanning capabilities, there's only 1 in a million misscans as opposed to the 1 in 300 type mistypes on a typing. Especially if you're like me, it's more like 1 in 100. So just keep that in mind. You can have a potential reduction in errors. Also, customer service. Most companies are focused on improving customer service. So whatever you can do to improve customer service, you're going to be better off. So basically, it's getting the right item shipped at the right time. There's a concept called the perfect order index. You can take a look at that on your own. But whatever you can do to support the perfect order, whether it's getting the percent of orders shipped on schedule, percent of lines, percent of total units, and how long are you going without stockouts in the warehouse. So whatever you can do to improve any one of these areas, and you can see some of the WMS impacts on the right. These are some of the things that you can do with a reasonably sized warehouse management system to support customer service levels. So you can look at improved customer service, but again, how do you quantify that? That's going to be your specific challenge in terms of an ROI. Workload management. If you have a lot of if you have a lot of labor or a lot of orders going through the warehouse, you may see a lot of bottlenecks in certain areas. So whatever we can do to help provide visibility into what's the workload going to be today, tomorrow, for the week, you can start planning in advance, and we call that wave management. So it allows you to plan processes by the hour. So it gives you an idea. Instead of maybe you have orders that are coming down from your ERP system, you get 500 a day or 1,000 a day. Do you want to release all of those at the same time, or do you want to group them into smaller batches to be more manageable on the shop floor? So the tools in the warehouse management system will allow you to better forecast and better plan. We call that the waving process. So you can wave orders by specific customer, by specific carrier. There's just a ton of different ways to do it, specifically within the Accellos system, and those are very helpful in terms of planning how much labor you're going to need. And also, one of the good things about especially the Accellos system is it gives you a specific date and time stamp of everything that happens. So because we're moving products around with the handheld scanners, we're doing confirmations when we pick something up and confirming when we put it down, the quantities and who we are because we're logged in as a specific user. Then I can always go back in and look at the log, transactions log, and determine who moved the items, when it was received, and when it was a cycle counter, those types of things. So I have real-time visibility into activity logs, and that can help as well. A warehouse management system sometimes, as I mentioned before, sometimes it's a cost of doing business, but it also can support other initiatives within your supply chain. So again, if you don't have a warehouse management system, you just might be the weakest link in your supply chain. That's certainly not a place you want to be. It can't just become a black box or a black hole of information, where orders go in, you're not really sure what happens, and orders sometimes come out. So if you can start becoming more of a value-added services in your supply chain, and things like a warehouse management system can help with that, that's probably going to be to your benefit. Again, how do you justify it? That's really going to be up to you. Postponement strategies, cross-docking. If you can do some of these processes, you're going to become more competitive in your supply chain, and that's going to just obviously result in a better warehouse. Supply chain visibility, as I said before, if you don't have a warehouse management system that tells you the orders are being picked, what level of inventory do I have? Maybe I just received a specific item. I want to know that item was received. I can set up supply chain event management applications to show or set up alerts in my warehouse to show or send me a text message that item was received. So there's a lot of new other things that you can do just by implementing the technology. The core thing of what WMS does is it makes your operations more efficient, but it also allows you to possibly support these other initiatives that your management team may be looking at. But again, how do you justify those? That's going to be really up to your business logic. You can also, there are other intangible benefits, maybe shared support. If I call this the McDonald's effect. So if you've got multiple warehouses, maybe one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, it helps if you have a warehouse management system. You almost have to standardize your processes. So if you go from one warehouse to the next, the processes are pretty much going to be the same. And again, as I said, I call that the McDonald's effect, meaning if I get French fries from McDonald's in Boston, I get some in Chino, California, I can pretty much rest assured they're going to be the same taste and the same quality. So I'm getting that shared support effect. Also, employee satisfaction might be a benefit just from being able to work with technology. A few years ago when the labor supply was tight and you were basically, competing with your neighbors to hire people in the warehouse. Sometimes having new technology in the warehouse wasn't a justification or an added benefit as opposed to 50 cents or adding 50 cents an hour to the cost. You might just have the benefit of telling your potential employees that they can work with this new latest and greatest technology. Or if you're misplacing orders, or if your order cycle times are taking too long, if you think you can't deliver things within the hour or within the day, you're going to miss those commitments to your customers. And then something else that I like is the ability for user networking. So let's say you put in the Accellos WMS. Maybe we have an annual user conference where you can get together. You can talk to our R&D team. You can talk to our salespeople. You can talk to our executive leadership. But most importantly, you can talk to other Accellos users that are using the application, and they might be doing things different than you. So it's a good way to go out and share ideas and discuss best practices. Now, again, it's tough to quantify that, but it is something that you might be able to discuss with the management team as a possible benefit. Again, it's up to you. So what I've done is, as we near the end of our discussion, what I've done is there's quite a few other benefits that I take a look at. But what I do is I kind of categorize them against the tangibleness. So if it's a highly tangible benefit based off of what we've discussed, or if it's intangible, I look at that along the characteristic. And then I kind of look at, from a management's responsiveness, how do I expect that they will think this is a good benefit versus it's kind of something that they might shrug off. So once you do that, you can start categorizing these. So if I look at labor, for example, is all the way in the upper right-hand side, it's a very tangible benefit, as I spoke about earlier, and management responsiveness is going to be very high to that. And you can start looking at things, again, like space. It is a tangible benefit. Management may or may not be responsive to it, but again, I would still categorize it as an Area 1 type of benefit. Then you can start looking at other things, like the user group, for example, might be, it's in between tangible and intangible. How you justify it, that's up to you. The management may not be too excited about claiming that as a benefit. Value-added services, being able to provide more. If you look in the upper left-hand side, that is definitely, it's definitely going to be responsive to management, especially if they want to start making more commitments to customers that you can do things in the warehouse. They will take that as a benefit, but again, how tangible is that? You'll have to determine how much dollar savings you can put to that. Also, if you look at performance measurements, Accellos WMS offers a key performance indicators dashboard that allows you to report on the day-to-day activities of what's happening in the warehouse in real time. Management's typically going to be responsive to that. Now, the problem is, what I see the challenge is how do you justify that in terms of dollars? So I think you'll be able to be more efficient with having knowledge about your operations, but again, you'll have to determine what that benefit is to you. So there's things in there, again, that you can consider as justification that I didn't talk about. And then finally, the area, I call it Area 3, things like employee satisfaction and misplaced orders. It may not be misplaced orders. You may not be doing that now. You may not be having misplaced orders today. Or if you are, sometimes it's very difficult to quantify that. But I would kind of categorize those as an Area 3 type of benefit. But again, once you understand the type of benefit that it is, then you can determine if you have the courage or the clout to present it to management in a return on investment or an ROI. Also, you'll probably have some type of tool or some preferred template that your organization prefers to use in terms of how do what's the tool that you use to calculate the ROI or the return on investment. So some companies use a form of the Dupont Analysis. This basically says, whatever I'm doing, I want to focus in on shareholder value creation. And I can do that through increasing my net operating profits or reducing my expenses in terms of improving capital cost and allocation. So if I start looking to the right side, what are the areas that a WMS can benefit shareholder value, and how is it going to do it? So if I look at some of the value levers I've put on the right-hand side, increasing volumes or improving order fill rates, a good warehouse management system will definitely have an impact and allow you to do more business with the same resources. And that's going to increase your revenues, it's going to increase gross profits, it's going to increase net operating profits, and it's going to have a positive impact on your value creation. So again, you can start looking at other areas, reducing freight, reducing indirect labor warehousing costs, reducing customer service and order management costs. Those are going to reduce your operating expenses, which has an impact. Down below on capital expenditures, if you can reduce your inventory levels, reduce work in process or reduce your finished goods inventories, It's going to allow you to optimize your accounts payable and your accounts receiving. That's going to have a positive impact on your capital deployment, which means you're going to have a better overall shareholder value creation. So again, I'm not suggesting that you use this. It just gives you a way of thinking about how are you going to have an impact on your company. You can say I'm going to reduce my work in process, but what does that really mean to your CFO or your CEO? Just gives you a tool to think about. Now, from a change management perspective, and trying to realize the return on investment faster, once you've told your company that you can have an ROI of possibly 9 months. So if we spend this money, we're going to get the money back within 9 months. If you can actually do that in 6 months, you're going to be ahead of the curve. So if you look at it from a change management perspective, there's things that you can do to realize the ROI quicker. However, one of the things I want to caution you on is sometimes on any implementation, whether it's WMS, ERP, whatever, there's always going to be some drop-off in productivity through employee learning curve, and that's sometimes people don't realize that until it's too late. So if you look at a system implementation, you're going along at steady state, you implement this solution, typically there might be a drop-off in productivity just because you're working through new processes. You may have to reconfigure the system. It's not doing something exactly what you want to do. But your objective is to minimize how long it takes to get you back up to productive speed and how low productivity goes during that new implementation cycle. And then obviously you want to get back up to productive levels, and then that's where you can really start having continuous improvement. But too many times I've seen people, they don't really understand this phenomenon for change management and project implementation. So just keep that in mind as you're making commitments to your management team, that this might be, you might see a slight drop-off, might be 2 weeks, might be 1 week, whatever it is, there's going to be some drop-off, but we're going to get back to productivity, and then we're going to be continuous. So what you can do from a change management perspective is, this is what I call engage to optimize. So before you actually go live, as you start doing the planning process, get as many people involved as possible. The more people involved, the more excited they're going to be, and the more prepared they're going to be during go live. And I caution this, as Nick had mentioned, I'm an industrial engineer. There was a study done in the 40s and 50s called the Hawthorne effect, which, and I don't know if you recall that, but they were studying the productivity of people doing assemblies, and they turned the lights down, and they noticed that productivity went up. They studied it for a few weeks. They came back in, they turned the lights up, and they noticed that productivity, again, went up. Well, the answer was that sometimes people are more productive just because they're being paid attention to. And that's the case for WMS implementations. If you can involve as many people as possible early on, maybe they're going to get excited. You might even get a bump in productivity without even implementing the system. But when you do implement the system, you may still have a drop off in productivity, but hopefully it won't be as long and it won't be as extensive, and then you'll be back up to productive speed faster, and you'll be able to work on continuous improvement initiatives more quickly. So that's my change management philosophy for the day. Is I encourage you to get as many operators involved as possible. There's a lot of different ways to do that, which can be a different topic for a different discussion. But the idea is just don't be a one-man show or a one-woman show. Just go out and get as many people involved as possible, and you'll see a better return on investment sooner. So just a quick commercial about Accellos. We are an end-to-end supply chain solutions offering for the small to mid-sized business, meaning we look at selling the solution based on value. So we do offer all the capabilities that I've spoken about. We do have the tools to help realize those savings, but we also offer other functionality that you may need. For example, if you have a lot of dock doors, a lot of carriers, you've got appointment scheduling capabilities. If you need to collect document images, we've actually got a document imaging solution. I mentioned earlier we've got the integrated shipping system, which supports both parcel as well as LTLs, and we've even got the key performance indicators dashboard. So there's a lot of solutions that we offer just beyond the core inbound and outbound warehouse management system. And when I say we focus on the SMB, it's important to know that there are solutions that you can implement for, as I said, maybe if you've got 2 or 3, 4 users in your warehouse, you may be a good fit just to put data collection in. I see that as a short-term solution because if you put data collection in over bad processes, you're just going to be doing the wrong things faster, and you don't really have a chance to implement best practices or do any re-engineering if you just implement data collection solutions. It's typically less expensive, but you don't get a lot of functionality. At the other extreme, there are like enterprise-wide warehouse management system solutions that are typically focused on the Fortune 100 type companies. They're looking at very large warehouses with hundreds of people working in them. They're good. You have the ability to go in and do re-engineering with those types of solutions, but they're typically heavily customized. They're very expensive to implement to get all that functionality that you see. And a lot of times what we've seen for the small to medium-sized businesses is you're paying for functionality that you may not be using. So what Accellos does is we're a full-featured Accellos WMS, warehouse management system, and we kind of sell based on the value. So if you don't need advanced replenishment strategies, maybe you don't necessarily need to buy that module. So it's kind of sold a la carte to a certain degree. So we offer a unique high functionality for the price that's being paid. So that's the key. That's where we focus. That's where we grew up, and that's what we designed our system around.